name is back in the trade rumor mill. What does this mean for his future in Vancouver? Hey, everyone. Welcome into Off the Post. Rob Wong, joined alongside by Bruce Garriock in Ottawa and Steve Simmons in Florida, but usually Toronto, enjoying that great Florida weather right now. We are all very jealous of you, Steve, but we have brought you out of your hibernation to discuss some hockey topics with us. And just when you thought, guys, things couldn't get any worse for the Vancouver Canucks, who are dead last in the NHL. There are now reports that the Canucks have been talking to teams like the Devils and Red Wings about Quinn Hughes' availability, although nothing is currently imminent. Bruce, I guess it's not a great sign when he's calling Devils GM Tom Fitzgerald Fitzy in media scrums. Do you think Hughes is still a Canuck after the trade deadline?
Well, I think that Steve Simmons still calls him Fitzy, or calls him Fitzy. I know I do. Look, I don't think it's probably not a good sign if he's calling him Fitzy in media scrums. What this means for Quinn Hughes' future in Vancouver, Steve, is I don't think it looks very promising. Jim Rutherford opened a can of worms at the end of his end of season press conference last year when he said that at some point Quinn Hughes wanted to play with his brother. I mean, that's akin here to Steve Staios sitting up there and saying, at some point Brady wants to play with Matthew in Florida. I think if you look at the situation that Quinn Hughes is in Vancouver, if you ask me what are the chances of Quinn Hughes finishing the year in Vancouver, I'd say they're not very good. I mean, the Canucks aren't out of it yet, but they're hearing the anthem, and I think if you look at the situation right now that they are in, they've got the ability to not only get a young center they want, but perhaps a defenseman in return for Quinn Hughes, Steve, and a team gets an opportunity to have a pretty good defenseman and sign him to an extension.
Here's the problem from where Jim Rutherford and the Vancouver Canucks sit. You have an absolute elite player. There aren't many of them in the NHL. There certainly aren't many of them on defense. You have one of them.
Oh, yeah.
You can't possibly get equal value back in a trade. There's no way you can make that work. And when you have an owner like the Canucks have, and Mr. Aquilini, he doesn't believe in rebuilds. He doesn't want to bottom out. And if you look at the Canucks right now, the best thing they can do is hang on to Quinn Hughes, finish last, win the lottery, get the draft pick, and start over again, so to speak, with maybe two of the best players in the NHL or two of the better players.
Yeah.
Right now, if you're making a list of the best players in hockey, I think in the top 11 or 12, Quinn Hughes is one of them. He's very close to, Cale Makar's by himself. Yeah. But when he's playing well, and he hasn't played that well this year, when he's playing well, he's in that group. And he's in that guy. He's a guy who changes games the way Patrick Mahomes changes games in football. He moves in different ways. He goes side to side. He does things that most players aren't capable of doing, and he sees things that other players don't see. And that's one of the most underrated things of superstars in hockey. He has vision, as does his brothers. And they were born with these skills, and it's incredible to watch them. And yeah, he wants to play with his brothers. But yeah, if Fitzy is calling me, and yes, I've been calling him Fitzy forever, so I'm allowed to do that. If Fitzy is calling Vancouver about Quinn Hughes, I'm asking for the world. I'm asking for Hershire. I'm asking for Namek. I'm asking for some of their best players in return. And now they're not going to make that deal, of course, but that's what I'm going to ask for. And I don't know what else you're going to want unless you got a Hughes brother back in the deal, which isn't going to happen either. Well, this reminds me a little bit of the Sedin draft when Brian Burke was able to manipulate everything and wind up, with the two of them.
Rob, you might have to say his name for me. The Devils were here last night. Is it Grits? I don't know how to say his.
I
he had a 2-point effort, and I can't say his name a little bit. But I'd ask for that guy back after what I saw last night. And the Devils broadcasters were singing his praises when we were talking to them before the game. The other thing, I just wonder, Steve, like I look, we both love dealing with Jim Rutherford because, we've known him for years. We've known him since he was in Hartford. We know how he is. We've known him since junior hockey. Like we know how he is to deal with it. But I kind of feel in this situation, guys, that perhaps his honesty has pushed him into a situation he probably didn't want this early. One of the things you sent us in the text, Rob, was that you said, do you think that Quinn Hughes will finish the year with the Canucks? Like, I don't think so now because of what Jim said at the end of last year. I think he's expedited a situation that probably wasn't going to rear its ugly head until maybe the end of this season. I don't know.
Well, it depends. I mean, you look. I'll take last year to this year, for example. Last year, Quinn Hughes, to me, was just behind Cale Makar as the second best defenseman in the NHL. And then you saw the young guys like Lane Hudson coming up, and now you're seeing Schaefer coming up, obviously with the Islanders. And Quinn Hughes was third, I believe, in scoring among defensemen last year, third in even strength scoring, third in power play scoring. Very consistent with a team that didn't have a whole lot of offensive threats around him. And this year, he's like 33rd in scoring among defensemen. He's like 33rd in even strength points and power play points. He's way down from where he was. So what you have is this fabulous asset that's not playing at peak value, which would give you peak return in a deal. And I think Rutherford's smart enough as a hockey man to realize that, it's like selling your house at the wrong time. Yeah. You want to sell it when the market's good. And right now, unless somebody comes and blows you away with an offer, and I could see some teams doing that because I would want Quinn Hughes on my team in a second. I don't care what my team is. Yeah. I'd want him on my team. He changes game. He changes teams. And how many players in the NHL do that? Probably less than 10. And so, yeah. And Rutherford's smart. But what we don't know is what is he hearing from the owner in his ear? And that is, I have been told by people who have worked with Francisco Aquilini in the past that, he's like dealing with a dog who's got drool coming down the side of his mouth and you put your hand out to pat him and he bites you. Well, you have to play the owner in this circumstance as much as you play everything else. And you know what? It's like for Jim Rutherford, it's like carrying 3 or 4 balls in one hand and trying to juggle them. And I don't know how he's going to come out of this, with all the balls still not falling to the ground.
Yeah, well, it does seem like he's being pulled in many different directions. And if there's one thing that maybe he hates more than not swinging a trade, it is a rebuild, Steve. He hasn't been a part of a lot of those over his career. But, we've seen the path that a San Jose, Chicago, or Anaheim has gone down recently. And, they're coming out of it now. They're still not at their ultimate goal, but it works. On the other hand, you're looking at a Buffalo, which has seemingly been in a rebuild forever, maybe their second or third rebuild under Kevin Adams. But is it possible for the Canucks to have their cake and eat it too if they decide not to go full rebuild and go forth here with whatever happens with Quinn Hughes?
I think they're in a bad position either way, because it's not like they're Anaheim with 5 or 6 prospects ready to hit at the same time. It's not like they're San Jose with the next great young forward in hockey. So you're in those positions. There's not a lot on the Vancouver roster that you look at and say, yeah, I really like that guy. They have a couple of guys. They have some guys that are probably overpaid. They have nobody that changes games or really makes your team better. They have complementary players, and they have a goalie who's never healthy. It's wonderful to have an elite goalie who changes your team, but an elite goalie who's never healthy doesn't help you a whole lot. So I don't know if rebuilding makes sense. I don't know if selling Hughes makes sense. I don't know what the answer is because I don't like what they have now. And I suspect going for the first draft, if I was them, I'd be going for the first draft pick. Bottom out, get the guy from Western Canada and go from there.
Yeah, and you're right. Like, they don't have a lot of great pieces, right? And or if they have great pieces, that they can't keep it together. I mean, they probably should have been alarmed when Rick Tocchet left, right? Like that was clearly a sign of trouble. And you're right, Rob. Jim Rutherford doesn't like a rebuild. He likes to have a team that's competitive, is going to make the playoffs, and he likes to add. He doesn't like to subtract. And they got to be careful. You can talk about the Buffalo Sabres in an endless rebuild, but they got to be careful too that you don't end up like the Calgary Flames, who are all of a sudden kind of waiting around wondering where they fit. It's a tough call to make, and as Steve says, from what I've heard about the ownership there, it's an even more difficult call to make.
And you know what? If I was a GM out there, and if I was a coach out there, or even an owner out there, I'll take that Buffalo Sabres roster right now. You give me the roster as it is right now. And with the right coach and the right GM, they're a playoff team. They're a disaster where they are right now. They're going to be a disaster. This will be year 15, I guess, if they don't make the playoffs in a row. That's almost impossible to do. It's virtually impossible to do that in hockey. You have to be a complete idiot for a long time. And the Sabres have had no shortage of complete idiots, running their franchise, including the owner, who's maybe number one on the complete idiot list. So there's a team like you look. I always like to look at rosters and say, "Oh, can I live with this? What's my defense going to look like? How do I make my forwards work?" Well, I like their top 6 forwards. I like their top 4 defensemen. I don't like their goaltending that much, but I'm saying you give me that, I can work with that. I can live with that, and it's better than a lot of teams that are, above them. And so, the thing with Vancouver is, though, what do you like? Like maybe a couple of the third line-ish kind of players, maybe Brock Besser as a
like
second.
Connor Garland.
Connor Garland, and there's another guy whose name's now escaping me, a forward who's a real go-getter. But I don't like Pettersson, and I don't like
DeBrusk. You would like Jake DeBrusk.
Yeah, but not for my first line.
No.
And so you look at it, and why does Rutherford at this stage of his life hate rebuilds? He's in his 70s. Jimmy Rutherford should probably be retired. For whatever reason, he's still working and he still loves it. And these kind of guys always, they wind up getting Lamoriello'd in the end. They run out of time. But, this may be the last, stop for him, because this team is really, in a rough spot with this wonderful asset in Quinn Hughes, who's just a brilliant player. And if you because we don't stay up late enough, and I'm an insomniac, so I'm watching the late night games more often than most people. If you haven't seen a lot of Quinn Hughes, it's like if you haven't seen a lot of Celebrini, if you haven't seen a lot of Leo Carlsson in Anaheim, my God, there's some good players out there that you may not know about. But Quinn Hughes over the last few years has just been special to watch.
Yeah, it's been remarkable to see what he's done, and we'll see where he ends up before the end of the season if he's still in Vancouver. The standings, at least as far as the points go, look favorably on the Canucks. They're just 6 points out, but the problem is half the conference is ahead of them, seemingly from where they are in a wild card position. So going to be interesting. We'll be talking about it, I imagine, a lot more as the season progresses. As always, leave your thoughts in the comments section below. For Steve Simmons and Bruce Garriock, I'm Rob Wong. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you on the next one.